Time now to join Frank O'Callaghan for the next instalment of the series Dundalk's Radio and Television People. Part 3. In the next edition, we continue with the recording of Frank O'Callaghan's presentation in the County Museum, Dundalk. John and James McLaughlin talk about their father, Sean, and his shop, Universal Radio and TV, in Park Street. Deirdre and John McArdle talk about John McArdle's, also in Park Street, and Brian O'Neill recalls stories from his time at R.Q. O'Neill's in Earl Street.
I want to move on now to Universal Radio and TV, Park Street, Dundalk, Sean McLaughlin. Here's the shop that most of you will remember. And in recent times, Sean's family donated old product, some of which is outside here, to the museum here tonight. So I'm pleased to say that we have John and James with us tonight. And again, to the two guys in any particular order. In the interview, you made a lovely point about Sean's life in London and where he worked and how he got his education in television. So just give me a few words about that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. So, like most people, I suppose, my father went to England in the 50s, and he was labouring on. I always remember him telling me the Isle of Dogs. He was shoring up the water coming in. I think it was oil tankers. They were building the oil tanks on the Isle of Dogs. So I think he wanted to do a bit better, and he'd done a radio repair course. I think it was City and Guilds. Don't ask me where it was, but he'd done it in London, and he eventually got a job in Harrods, repairing the radios in Harrods.
You mean the Harrods?
The Harrods, yeah. We were as surprised as you.
Top hat and tails as he worked, was it?
No, we were as surprised as you when we heard it. But he also spoke about a time repairing the intercom system in Harrods. So really his job was to repair the radios that were coming back to be sold, or that were sold and needed repair. But he spent 10 years in England, and he came back to Ireland. And I suppose that's what gave him the basis for getting into whatever business he got into then after that.
Why did he set up in Dundalk, and how did that actually happen?
Well, I'll let John talk about that, my brother.
Yeah, hi Frank. So my dad was from Kells in County Meath, and when he came back from England, he didn't, as James might have mentioned there, he didn't want to work on a farm, which was most of the jobs around Kells. So he had worked, as James said, in Harrods in England, and he decided to set up his own TV and radio repair. So him and his father travelled to Navan, Drogheda and Dundalk, looking for a larger town that would support that business, because Kells was too small at the time. They liked the look of Dundalk better, and as plenty of the audience would know here, Dundalk was a hub for TV at that time, because it was able to get reception from the UK, from the north, and get channels that weren't available then in the country. So he decided to set up in Dundalk. Next door, the Vinegar Man's Brian McIntyre owned that shop, and my dad leased it. Took a lease out on that shop and opened Universal Radio and TV.
So when you have the microphone in your hand, tell me about the story about Sean's giving a television to his auntie.
Oh yeah, we had an old aunt that lived in Carnaross in Kells, and she had nothing in the house. Well, she had a radio and she lived on her own. And this particular day we went over to install. He had decided to give her a TV, and we went over to install it. So he plugged it in. I was only young at the time, and he plugged it in, and whatever came up on the screen was flowers. It was, of a field or something. So she stood up off the chair, and she was amazed at it. And then she went round the back of the TV to have a look and see the flowers and smell them. And what she seen was the back of one of the photographs he had up earlier, and she was aghast. She was looking for the flowers and asking my father where they went.
And were they not there?
They were there. They were only on the front of it, and there was no smell.
All right. So one more question, maybe James. I have to ask you this. It's romance. How did your mum and dad meet?
Yeah. Well, it was indirectly through TVs and radios, I suppose. We can say my mother, Rita Hanratty, was her maiden name from Crossmaglen. She went to America when she was 18 to study as a nurse, but she came back on holidays to visit home. And a couple of days before she was meant to go home, she went out with her sister in Dundalk, who was going with a fella called Pat Toner from Forkhill. But Pat Toner worked for my father, and he went round picking up the rental money, like from the rental card above. That's my father's rental card. So Pat said he wanted to finish a bit early to go and meet his new girlfriend, and my father says, "Sure, I'll be with you." So, long story short, he met my mother. My mother went back to America for a year, and she came back, and then they set family up. Then set home up in Glenwood, and
lived happily ever after.
Yep.
Yeah. Well done. Thanks very much. Moving on, just very briefly, there was a Cavendish's furniture company in Clonbrassil Street on the Farney Furnitures. They basically sold furniture, but you can see that each of them had a television for sale. And in Cavendish's had a 19-inch pie at 72 guineas, or 13 shillings per week, or in December of 1960, Farney's had a television for 11 shillings and 6 pence. Now, I don't know what 11 shillings and 6 pence is in today's money, but there was only a few shillings, a few bob, you know. So not much more to be said about them, but here's a lovely couple of photographs here of the man John McCardle from Park Street. And again, a cutting from the Dundalk Democrat on the 5th of September 1959. And we had £2 and 7 shillings per week, or per month rather, on only 69 guineas for a Bush television. I'm very pleased to welcome tonight John and Deirdre, who are the children of grown-up children at this stage. And Deirdre, you have a lovely story you want to tell us about. I'll let you tell the story.
Yes, Frank. Kathleen and John McCardle, my mum and dad, ran their hardware shop in Park Street and sold and rented televisions. And of course, a lot of people bought their first television from them. And that was people from Dundalk and around the area, Knockbridge, Louth, Enniskeane. And of course, this after-sales service, it was all about installation and the after-sales service, as we've heard. And Daddy would have to go out regularly to check up on problems where TVs weren't working. So on this particular occasion, he headed out to a particular farmhouse, and he went into the kitchen, and there was a lot of hens pecking around the kitchen floor. You might see where it's going. And he took a look around the back of the TV, and in those days you took off the back, and quite often it was simple enough, if I remember rightly, you'd take off the back and maybe there'd be valves or something would need changed. Anyway, he quickly realised that the hens were using the television as a roosting post, and that there was a large deposit of manure down the back. So he was embarrassed and didn't really want to draw attention to it. So as the man that he was, he just cleaned it off, fixed the problem, and left the family to watch their favourite programme, The Reardons.
Yeah, the little untold stories. Well done to your dad. There's a story too about an Art Brennan who came back into the shop one day. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Daddy had grown up in Knockbridge and sadly had lost his own father when he was very young, and his mum had sold the farm just as he was turning 18, but he got a little bit of money out of that, and Mum wanted to set up a bakery. He wanted to set up a hardware shop, so the two of them put their money together and set up the hardware shop. But one day, a lot of people would have sent people into our shop if there were Americans in town. John McCardle will know who their people are and where they're from, and people would have come in regularly. But this particular Saturday morning, we were all in the shop working as we regularly did, and this gentleman arrived in, and it turned out to be Daddy's friend Art Brennan, who he'd grown up in Knockbridge with, but he hadn't seen since they were literally 8. But they immediately recognised each other, and there
how
was
many
tears.
years later was that, actually?
Oh, they're in their 50s, so it was a lot of years. How they recognised each other, I do not know. And of course, people didn't come home regularly in those days. And Art stayed and they went fishing, and Art painted a picture, a watercolour of him, which we have, thankfully, and they reacquainted themselves, and then Art ended up coming home, I think, regularly in the
So
summers.
after all those years, they still recognised
They
one
still
another.
recognised each other, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. John?
I can remember living over the shop, lived there till about the mid-70s. And I can remember even on a Christmas day, a woman coming round from Williamson's Place, no television. My father had a large selection of valves. I think there was 16, maybe Tom Lamb could contradicted me there, but he would go around and he'd say you couldn't leave a woman with 4 kids on Christmas Day, so he normally got them out of trouble. Good memories. I can remember Mr. Fox actually being in our yard at times. There was somebody setting up machines, and John's dad was there.
You see, ladies and gentlemen,
Again, my father taught an awful lot.
this is one of the values of what Dundalk FM are doing with these programmes, because what they're doing is, and this is not to my credit, it's to the station's credit and to the credit of all the people here talking tonight. You're learning stories about one another's families and how that integration of people actually worked and where the association worked. And when you hear all these programmes going out, I think they're going to be tremendous listening for you as much as anything else. So thanks very much to both of you. I'm going to move on now to the company of R.Q. O'Neill's. Where's Brian? So Brian, you're very welcome tonight, and we had a very interesting conversation one evening.
Before you ask the question...
I didn't ask the question yet,
Well,
Brian. I was
before
going to
you
tell
ask
him.
it-
I was going to tell him the conversation started at 7 o'clock and finished at 9:30.
Right. I noticed 2 things on that screen. One is servicing. And televisions nowadays are not serviced. You just throw them away. And, televisions and radios with all the little bulby things and thingamajigs that were in it, they were repaired and kept going. The second thing is that I noticed is in order to make a payment on an invoice, you had to put a stamp. So what's your question?
I forget. Actually, this is very interesting. I got this here from the museum. They had this on file here, and it's dated 1953. And it's for a baby belling cooker that cost £15. And this, as far as I can establish, was a photograph of the baby belling cooker. But you can see here that R.Q. O'Neill sold a large range of GEC products and Pye products and Philips products. But the thing that struck me most was what you said about when your family started your business in 1902. Tell the audience about the product that is sold, because it had nothing to do, obviously, with televisions.
There were 2 brothers, James O'Neill and R.Q. O'Neill. Both of them came from my grandfather's farm in Carrick-a-Stickin, just on the border there. And one of them set up a tobacco shop, stationery, library, photographs, making out photographs from the whatever you call it, and the other one then, RQ, set up the hardware shop, but it was a huge business, and we would at that stage, even then, have had maybe a couple of hundred suppliers. Yeah. And in coming here tonight, I thought of another story that I haven't told you, but because Frank McCardle is here, I want to tell the story. Opposite RQ's was a chemist shop. I think they're called pharmacies now. Loretta Murphy. And at the back of that was a warehousing. And upstairs in the warehousing, apart from other things that we did, which was farm machinery, etc., in the 1950s, early 50s, I would go up to the station on a messenger bicycle to gather day-old chicks. And I would take them down to behind Loretta Murphy's, go up the stairs, and we used to have gas, I was going to say incinerators, incubators or whatever it was. Well, if I was doing the fixing, it would have been an incinerator.
Go on.
And so why we had that was because we wanted to sell this product. We were agents for Keller Gas. Now that Frank's here tonight, I'm wondering, did he buy them off us? And if he did, he owes us money.
And you better see the taxman. But you told me a lovely story too about the train that arrived in with a carriage full of R.Q. O'Neill product, and the B&I steam packet company that came into the Dundalk Harbour.
Right.
Just recap on those
there are
two.
two stories of that. In the railway station in, where's it down?
Barrack Street.
Barrack Street. We would have cordoned off part of the railway line, part of the where the goods were left off the train.
Platform.
The platform. Williamson's would have the same, etc., etc. Because we would buy carriage loads of stuff would come down. Now, also, the railway people used to deliver to the shops in town horses and carts. And that was the time in the 1950s where I used to have to go in on a Sunday and take the horse out and run it up and down the back, I was going to say back passage, whatever it is, the backyard of our queues and feed it oats. Because we did deliveries with a horse and a low float. The low float was because we would be putting cement on, or we'd be putting fireplaces on, or we'd be putting an aga cooker on. But then when we went into the televisions, we had to buy a van because Tom Lamb didn't want to go in a horse and cart. So that was that. Now, that was the railway station. You then took up the British and Irish Steam Packet Company, which was down on the docks. We used to take in barrels, big barrels, stand 4 foot high, 3 foot in diameter. Wool would be in it, and in it would be china. Now, this wasn't long after the Second World War. So in England, you had rations still there, and they wanted to export things. So we got in the china, and every Saturday we put them in little wee boxes. And they were sold out every Saturday because North of Ireland came down to buy the china.
Thanks very much, Brian.
What's the next question?
I don't have a next question, Brian. You're off the hook. But anyway, just to add to Brian's story there, R.Q. O'Neill's actually sold petrol in 1915. They sold paraffin oil. They sold Hardy, a product called Hardy fishing rods and guns. But there is another question, Brian, if you don't mind me asking. It's a lovely question about how your father dealt with a woman who wanted 3 bicycles for children and couldn't afford to pay for them.
I think the story is indicative of the type of people and the family values that we had in the 50s and 60s and things like that. Girls leaving school would leave 15, 16, no prospects. And this was the story told by a particular woman who was the recipient. And the mother took the 2 children out of school. They came from the country. They wanted to go and work in holidays. And they were in the shop and they were looking at bicycles. So my father said to them, there's 2 bicycles, take them. When you get your wages, then pay me. And that's not him. That is the type of society we were in. That's what I believe.
Yeah. You're getting voices of support. You're right. It was a great society at the time, and how far we moved away from that. Brian, thanks very much for your contribution.
In this, the third part in the series, Dundalk's radio and television people, we heard stories from John and James McLaughlin, Deirdre and John McGardle, and Brian O'Neill. A special word of appreciation to Jim Curley, who helped with PowerPoint slides, and to Brian Walsh and the staff at the County Museum Dundalk for organising the television exhibition and facilitation of the venue. In the final recording of the presentation, recorded in the AV Theatre, County Museum Dundalk, Frank O'Callaghan talks about Des Downey, ITV Rentals, RTV Rentals, and Baldwin's. And we hear from Ursula Tennyson, Ní Maguire, and Jackie Maguire about Benny Maguire's in Church Street. The series, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, was researched and presented by Frank O'Callaghan and recorded and edited by Alan Byrne.